Hi, everybody. This is Erica Mello, and welcome to episode number 189 of Tough to Treat. And Susan and I are closing in on 200 episodes. Oh my gosh, crazy. This episode is about a patient of mine who is a soccer player, and it will focus on the foot. It is a shorty, so it'll be a specific issue related to how I assessed him. And this is following on the heels of a re-release that we did last week, which was Thanksgiving week, if you are listening to this live when it drops. And this is a follow-up, basically, to the foot episode that we did last week, or that we re-released. So you want to think about, especially with soccer players or any athlete for that matter, how are you going to evaluate a movement pattern that makes them feel heard and feel felt, right? People want you to assess something that is meaningful to them. It may not be meaningful to you, but it needs to be meaningful to them, because you're not going to get the buy-in, right? You need the buy-in ultimately, right? Because that's the only way they're gonna believe in their program, right? This is a patient who had chronic adductor issues, bilateral, left worse than right. And I talked with him, and we chose a movement together. And I think I would actually advise a lot of our listeners to try this. I mean, it is a two-way street in my office. And when you're working with patients on assessing a movement pattern, and we often go and say, let's do this, and this, and you have them move, but they neither care nor it's meaningful to them. So you want to ask about a movement pattern that or something that they want to do that they can't do now. And you want to assess that. Even if you're going to assess something else, you want to look at that, which is what I did with him. And I will explain it a little bit more on the episode. And we're still putting the offer out there for any listener who wants to come on and run a case by us. It'll be a great mentoring opportunity for anybody. Email us at toughtotreatpt@gmail.com and put your name up there, and we'd be happy to bring you on the podcast. As a matter of fact, next week, Susan and I have had a fantastic physical therapist in from Georgia, and she had an amazing case, and we all came to sort of a plan of action at the end of the episode. So that will be next week. And one last message is, we're going into the end of the year, as you all know, and Susan and I are on the board of the GWHI, which is the Global Women's Health Initiative, gwhi.org. And it's an initiative, that is dedicated to really urgent women's health issues. I mean, across the globe, whether it's pelvic floor trauma, breast health, genital mutilation, osteoporosis, postpartum, maternal morbidity. It's an organization that we care very deeply about. And we also have started a doula program. We would really appreciate it if you would take the time to go to the website, and if possible, make a donation by the end of the year. We would truly appreciate it. The website is gwhi.org. And now on to the episode. Enjoy. Hi, everybody. This is Erica Mello, and welcome to episode number 189. And in the intro, I spoke a little bit about this case. He's a patient I treated last year, and it's a great follow-up to our last episode that we re-released, on the foot. And so I will get right to it. And Susan and I will probably unpack him. This case at a little bit more at length, but I wanted to talk about a specific issue with regards to the assessment. So I'll give you a little bit of background. 17 years old, I saw him last year. Not a lot of past movement history. For those of you who know me, I like to do a timeline. I like to look at the injuries prior, like a chronological injuries timeline, plus a movement history, plus any surgical timeline. This kid's young, right? And the reason why I do that is we always say, your first injury, honestly, it can be, mine was an ankle sprain in junior high school, and that was a long time ago. Your first injury sets you up, and your movement history and your subsequent injury history keeps you there. The first injury sets them up. Just remember those words. So at 17 years old, what are you going to ask? The first thing, any growth spurt a year ago. He's 17. He's probably pretty much done growing. Fairly tall kid, actually. Big soccer player. He was a striker. And he is left-footed, okay? So he came in to see me with bilateral adductor, sort of left more than right, bilateral adductor pain, really more on the left because he was left-footed, so that was his kicking leg. And the only other issue of note, sort of movement-wise, was that he played tennis. He was an avid tennis player. So a lot of footwork, a lot of agility for both sports. It wasn't like he played soccer and then he was a cyclist, right? He was on his feet and moving. So both sports require a lot of movement, a lot of agility. You know, whenever I see, if I don't even know what the injury is, or if I have not met them and they've told me that they play soccer and that they play tennis, there are two regions of the body they're going to go on my magnet board or on my priority list before I even see them. Because I've seen these patterns before. One, let's take a guess. Take a guess. It's going to be the thorax, right? A lot of rotary movement going on in soccer and tennis. The thorax has to be on the list. Most patients don't come in complaining of thoracic pain, but I'm telling you, most patients have thoracic dysfunction. It's just up to us to figure out if it's the primary driver. And the second one would be the foot, which is one of the reasons why I'm doing this episode. And before I even met him and I heard that he was a soccer player, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to look at his foot. So I want you just to think about, play these little games with yourself or test yourself. And, if your patient plays a sport or does a movement or very often, for example, I have a patient who walks around Central Park the same way all the time. So you're going to know what areas of the body you want to prioritize. But especially with athletes, especially with a sport that they play, you need to know the regions of the body that are challenged with these particular sports. Okay? Tennis, it's a lot of shoulder, the GH, right? But with him, with soccer, the foot and the thorax right up there. Okay? So just do that with some of your patients, or all of them if you can, going forward. I'd play that little game and see if you actually, if you prove yourself right, if one of those is actually the driver, okay? So besides the little bit of a growth spurt that he had, he basically said he had some tight hamstrings. I mean, who doesn't when you're 17, right? No one really stretches that much, especially with some of these high school players. But he actually was on a bunch of travel teams. So he actually did do, I really questioned him on his warm-up. So I said to him, I said, okay, and Susan and I will unpack the assessment, but I said, when does this happen? I said, is it when you're kicking? Or is it leading up to the kick? Or is it after the kick? So he's like, oh, I don't know. And so I was starting to make him think about, oh, is it actually when I kick? Or is it when I lead up to the kick and then kick? And so I actually had him do a little bit of it in the office. And you can do that. Just find a space and they can run and practice. And he did that. He's like, oh, no, it's actually, the minute I'm leading up and then I go. So it's a transition from, so it's his left foot, okay? So it's a transition from, he's going on to his right leg. You think about yourself in a split squat. So the right leg is back. The right leg is front and the left leg is back and you're running. He's gonna run, so putting more weight on that right leg, and then he's gonna lift that left leg up and kick. Okay, so right leg in front, that left leg is coming up from behind him and then he's kicking. So you think about that. What movement or movements would you assess? You can video that, which I did, but that's kind of hard to assess a moving target, right? You can certainly dissect it on a video analysis, but you need to assess a little bit less of a dynamic movement at the start, because it'd be very hard for you to assess that movement pattern going forward, right? So think about it. Do you do one-legged standing because he's landing on his right leg and kicking with his left? Do you do a split squat? Do you do a forward lunge? Do you do a backward lunge? Do you do a side-to-side movement, as in a deep squat side to side? That would certainly challenge the hip, right, the adductor. Or do you do a squat, or you do something completely different? I'm just throwing things out there, okay? So you work with your patient on the movement that you're going to assess, especially with someone who's an athlete. They're clued in. They're clued into their bodies, and they know their body better than you. So you really want to think about becoming their partner in this. And I always tell my patients, I'm going to assess a movement that, I said, we're going to look at a movement that is meaningful to you or relevant to your issue. I tend to look at, I'll mention a few: lunge, squat, split squat. It just depends on the person. I can certainly look at another movement. Is there something that you really want me to focus on? This kid said, let's just try split squat and a lunge, and we'll see. And so I did do a basic static split squat. That was, he got it, but it wasn't horribly meaningful to him. And so I had him walk down the hallway, and I said, just do a walking lunge. And then maybe after every 3 reps, just instead of doing the lunge and bringing the left leg forward and putting it on the ground, just do a kick with that left leg. And so he did that. So he did 3 walking lunges, and then when the right leg went forward, he picked the left leg up and kicked. He's like, oh, that's definitely the issue. And so sometimes it doesn't happen that quickly. You may have to sort of trial a few. So I focused on the right forward lunge. So not the left, the right. So a lot of people would say, well, it's his left leg that's the problem. I'm like, yeah, but his leg is in the air when he's kicking. And so you could assess one-legged standing on the right, but the left leg isn't doing anything really there. So you want to assess a movement pattern where the right leg is more of the control leg, and the left leg is the moving leg. So a forward lunge does actually do that, a right forward lunge, okay? So I did that, and knowing he had no other movement issues, no other past injuries. It was always like bilateral adductor. You can assess one-legged standing if you want as another movement or another screening task, as we call it, but you are not going to get the most bang for your buck. Remember the priority list, okay? Yes, the priority list for him would be foot, thorax, pelvis, obviously, right? Hips. Maybe the knee a little bit low on the list. The knee is generally not going to be the primary issue in my experience. And so you've got a few regions of the body that you want to put on the priority list. So in one-legged standing, are you going to actually challenge those regions of the body that are on your priority list? So let's go through them. One-legged standing. Raise your hand if you're going to assess one-legged standing. I did not, but you certainly can if you would. Like, is the right leg challenged in that position? I'm sorry, the right foot. A little bit. Is the left leg? No. Left foot? No. Right hip? Yes. Right side of the pelvis? Yes. But the left leg isn't. So you sort of need to get both legs at some point on the ground in a moving fashion. So think about when you're choosing a movement with your patient, you want to make sure you assess the movement that, covers or encompasses the regions of the body that are on your priority list. Okay, if he had a shoulder issue, along with that, I probably would have had him do a lunge with a bilateral arm lift to 90 degrees. So you get my point here, right? You want to be efficient, okay? And you want to see the relationships of the regions of the body to each other. And so to make a long story short, when I had him in that position, his left foot, his back foot, was so poorly controlled that I took one look at him and I was like, and I said to myself, I almost said it out loud, but I said to myself, oh my God, his knee looks horrible. I mean, and I said that, I did not say that out loud, but I was just like, that's what I was thinking. I'm like, this guy's he's gonna have a knee issue at some point. His back left foot was so plantar flexed and inverted, he could not even get an effective lever for push off to get that left leg in the air and kick the ball. No wonder he had an adductor issue. He was operating from let's just say like a handicap, basically. Like, he's severely handicapped before he got his foot off the ground. Okay, so I'm going to repeat this. In the right forward lunge, when he pushed off that left leg to transition forward, his left foot was so poorly controlled. He was literally bearing all the weight on the lateral border of his foot in a we call it a twisted foot. So you want the foot to maintain its pyramid, right? So when you have somebody going into plantar flexion and inversion like that, that's a loss of control. Period. End of report. Okay. So with someone who needs precision, especially athletes, they need precision. They need to be almost perfect. Okay. So, and I hate to use that word, but they need optimal movement. We all need optimal movement, but they need it on a dime. They need it quick because they have quick reactions. They need it for their agility. They need it for performance. Okay? So if he's pushing off that left leg with a poorly controlled left foot, how do you think he's going to get that leg in the air and kick that ball with efficiency and with effectiveness, right? And with power, because that means, and even more, with accuracy. Okay? He couldn't. I tested the right, and it was much better. I showed the videos to him. I videoed this. He's like, oh my God, you're right. And he realized that, and I explained to him the length tension relationship of the adductor and to the knee and the hip and the foot. And I said, in his terms, that you're pushing off from a poorly controlled foot, which puts you at a disadvantage for getting the power into your leg. If you are losing control or even balance, resonated with him as if you're losing control or balance, how can your brain and your nervous system adjust quickly to get that leg in a better or more optimal position to kick the ball? He's like, you're right. I'm going a longer distance. And so I find videos really help with most people, and they can correct it if they can on a dime, if they can, because they know what good motor patterning is or optimal motor patterning is. Most athletes do, and they'll try and correct it. And so once he realized what he was doing, I said, I can certainly, you can certainly have treatment done, with the athletic trainers on your team, and that'll give you short-term relief, but you need to correct your movement pattern at your foot. Okay, because ultimately that's really is what is going to give you, higher power. And I obviously did a further assessment, but this short episode was really about picking a movement pattern, and that's when you get the buy-in. I showed him that picture, and he looked at his knee, and he was like, "Oh my God, my knee looks bad." And I was like, "It doesn't look great." But anyway, good kid and did well. So, but once again, think about a movement pattern and trial it with your patient. Get them involved in it, and if they don't want to be involved, just pick one. But most people actually do want to be involved. So hope you enjoyed it. If any has any questions, you know where to reach us, toughtotreatpt@gmail.com. And I hope you enjoyed it. And for the new listeners, thank you for listening, and for all of our older listeners as well. We really appreciate your testimonials that you've written on Apple Podcasts or wherever you have listened to us. And if you haven't left us a testimonial, we would really appreciate it if you would. It's a way that Apple and Apple Podcasts and all the other podcast outlets recognize us, and it improves our standings in the podcast world. So thanks again, and enjoy.